So I just got done seeing Black Adam in theaters, and I don't even know what I just watched, to be honest. That was without a doubt one of the strangest comic book movie experiences I've ever had, because the movie went in so many different directions, and it completely changed my opinion on the movie multiple times. There was actually a point in this movie where I thought it was terrible, and there was a point where I thought it was really good. And in the end, it just kind of ended up feeling sort of mediocre to me, and we'll get into why. Before we get into it, I want to say I'm definitely not one of those type of people to try to make this like big fight between Marvel and DC all the time, like I know a lot of people do. But I will say, over the past couple years, I've definitely been preferring DC's content over Marvel. Not to say I've always preferred it. I've definitely preferred a lot of Marvel projects in the past. I think they're probably just about equal to me in terms of quality. But I was really looking forward to this movie because I felt like DC has had a pretty good track record past couple years, and I was really expecting that to keep up, and I just don't feel like this one hit the landing the way I was hoping. I'm still very much excited for the future of DC, though. I think The Flash is probably going to be pretty good. I'm really hopeful for James Wan's Aquaman 2, and obviously now with Man of Steel 2 being announced recently, there's a lot of good stuff to look forward to, and obviously the stuff outside of the DCEU, like the Batman sequels and all that. I'm very excited for that, but this movie unfortunately just didn't really do it for me. But that doesn't mean it was all bad. There are a lot of positives about Black Adam that I would like to talk about today. First of all, it's a very visually pleasing movie. There are solid visuals, the colors are crisp, and when you see action on screen, it's a pretty damn good visual. It looks good. It's very easy to track what's going on. They do a lot of slow motion, which I don't really know if I'd put that in the negative or not, because yeah, they kind of overdo it, but it's done well. It's kind of like Zack Snyder's movies, which honestly, if you weren't to tell me who directed this movie going into it, I would assume it was Zack Snyder. It is very similar to Snyder's directing, which is not a bad thing. I think Snyder's directing is pretty good, but I will say they might have overdone it just a little bit, just here and there, because sometimes I felt like it wasn't really needed, although other times I felt like it did make for a really cool action scene. But when it comes to action and the visuals, none of that was really bad in this movie. It was all pretty consistently good. I enjoyed a lot of it. But action is just action. You know, it's nothing more than action. If you don't have a good story to supplement the action, then I'm not really going to enjoy the action as much, and I do feel like that was an issue this movie had. Another great thing, the powers of all the different heroes in this film were all really cool to watch. Obviously, Dr. Fate, seeing Dr. Fate on screen, it was incredible. And Cyclone, although she wasn't in much of the movie, she was pretty cool. Atom Smasher, I really enjoyed his character, not in terms of his like character progression or just character story. There was really no character story there, but for his action scenes and such, they were fun to watch. I thought they were good. And Hawkman was probably I would say between him and Dr. Fate, they were two of the best of this team, and they were fun to watch. And obviously Black Adam himself was also a blast to watch. I think his powers are pretty damn cool. The movie is incredibly violent too. Like when it comes to the action, they do go into some pretty dark places with the violent. I'm glad they did that. I wish obviously it was R. I'm always going to hope for an R rating as opposed to a PG-13 rating, just because I like seeing everything. You know, I don't like when they have to cut back a little bit, but it is a superhero movie, so I'm not really too opposed to it the way it is, and it definitely is pretty far in the violence for a PG-13 movie, so I'm definitely glad they didn't cut back too much, but I would have preferred a little bit more, even though it was still pretty damn good. There was a couple pretty violent kills in this movie that you wouldn't normally see in a PG-13 movie. And lastly, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is pretty good in this role. I think he is a solid cast for this. Obviously, he was cast like over 10 years ago for this role, and he's definitely very passionate about it, and he does a pretty damn good job in the role. I'm not really one to say he's like one of the best actors out there, because he's not really in movies that you would tend to call like that great of a movie in the first place. You wouldn't really expect him to give this standout performance, but he still is just good in it. He's good in the role, and I enjoy watching him, and I think he's the definitive Black Adam for years to come, most likely. So I enjoyed him in this role for sure. I think he did a great job. Now getting into the negatives, biggest thing to me was the lack of character progression or story or really anything of that nature. They had a couple of small sort of character moments, specifically with Dr. Fate and Hawkman, and they did a couple things with Black Adam, but you would be surprised. The amount of stuff that I feel like they didn't do, even with the main character, was kind of insane, because I will say most of the movie was action. Like for a big chunk of it, it was literally just non-stop action sequences, which a lot of people love that. but I can't get into that if there isn't a good story to supplement it, and I really don't feel like any of these characters had a good story to begin with. They didn't start giving these characters story until like the third act. Like we were all the way to the third act of the film, and then they started giving us interesting plot lines for a couple of the characters. Whereas in the beginning, it was just all like overarching story for what's going on, but the specific characters there, I didn't know anything about them. I didn't really care for any of them, and I didn't feel like they had a distinct personality yet until, of course, later on, I feel like they started to slowly get that. And I feel like they could have done more with these characters. If they just took their time a little bit more, I feel like this honestly could have been split, because there's like this semi-origin story in the beginning of the movie that takes like 10 minutes, which could have been its own origin movie in and of itself, to be honest. And then after that, you have the main story in this film, which feels like its own film. Now, obviously, I'm not going to get into spoilers here, but it doesn't really work as an origin when you learn some things later in the movie. But as a whole, it does feel like its own movie based on how much story is being told there. There's a lot of overarching story, a lot of history, but the specific characters in the film don't have that many character stories that make them interesting characters. So although I enjoyed watching them on screen, I enjoyed them in their action sequences, I didn't get much fulfillment out of their appearances in the movie because there wasn't much story there. Like, there really wasn't. The movie is so incredibly messy too in terms of the pacing. It is like wildly paced, and some of this could be contributed as a positive because the structure of this movie is really unique. It is not like any superhero movie I've personally seen. Sort of, I mean, I guess when you really think about it at a surface level, it is like every other superhero movie, but they do a couple of interesting things, specifically towards the end of the movie, that just threw me for like a loop. Like, I was like, whoa, what is happening? Because at first I was like, okay, this should be happening here. And then just like something very different happens out of left field, right? And although it's unique and different, it does feel like it's kind of messy because some stuff comes out of literally nowhere in this film. Like, there was no build-up or anything. It just kind of happened. And I'm like, well, the what? Like, a lot of things like that where there's just a lot of story points that come out of absolutely nowhere and have no build-up, which makes it feel messy and rushed. And a lot of the stuff in this film is rushed. I think that's the biggest way to describe it, which is crazy because the movie is, I think, over 2 hours long. So that's crazy for a movie to feel rushed when it's over 2 hours. And like I said, that's because the movie has so much overarching story to it and not enough character story, which is crazy to me. How do you focus so much on everything that's going on around the plot, but not anything that's going on inside of the plot itself? I do feel like the tone was kind of inconsistent too, which I'm okay with that. I'm okay with movies balancing different types of tone. Like Guardians of the Galaxy does that very well. You have very emotional moments, and then you have very fun and happy moments and very crazy. Like, it's okay to do that. But this movie does it in a way that doesn't feel right, and it's part of the pacing and structure, because you'll go from one moment where there's something that's kind of serious going on, and you're like, this should kind of be a serious moment for these characters, but then they kind of just joke around through it. They're like even smiling, and I'm like, well, why is that particular person smiling in this moment when there's stuff going on right now that they should be focusing on, because it could actually cause a lot of people to die? So a lot of stuff like that where it's just weird. The comedy was decently funny. I don't think it was like not funny at all, but it just wasn't well placed, I feel like, in the film. So I had a little bit of an issue with that. And to be honest, that's all I really have to say about this movie. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about this movie in the comments, because I think the reviews are going to be very mixed on this. I think a lot of people are going to really like it, whereas a lot of other people are not going to like it at all. And I was really hoping for something great here, but unfortunately, I don't think this was that great of a film. I'm not going to give it a low score though, because it still has a lot of solid stuff to it. Like, my rating's not going to be that low. I'm going to go with a 6 out of 10. And that's pretty low compared to what I usually give DC movies, to be honest. I think the last movie to get a 6 out of 10 for me was probably Birds of Prey. So yeah, most of the DC movies recently have been pretty good in my opinion. I haven't really disliked any of them, even for the DC shows. Like Peacemaker was great. But now let's get into the spoilers, because there are a couple spoiler things I wanted to talk about real quick, and obviously I wanted to have a non-spoiler section for the people who didn't see the movie yet. So what are my spoiler thoughts? Well, the only really spoilers I want to talk about for the movie itself and not the after credit scene would be, I guess Dr. Fate's death was a little disappointing, just because I would like to see that more of that character in the future, and unfortunately we're obviously not going to get any more of that character, at least in that form. They could try to do something else with it, with another character in some way, I don't know, but I just know we're probably not going to see Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate again, which is unfortunate because they didn't really do a crazy amount with him. The scenes that they did have were really awesome. I was hoping for like a Dr. Fate movie in the future, to be honest, and it seems like we're probably not going to be getting that. So that's unfortunate. The whole end with like, and that was what I was trying to talk about before in the non-spoiler review with, you think the movie's going to end. You're like, oh, you're getting ready for it to end, and then this whole other villain pops up. And I will say, it was cool because I do like the ending. Like, I really think it was probably one of the most entertaining parts of the film. It did feel like it was such an out of nowhere sort of twist, and it was interesting because it's a different. It was surprising. You know, I was not expecting the movie to have another 20 minutes. I didn't look at the runtime, so I didn't know there was going to be like another 20 minutes. I thought the movie was ending, and we get this whole other thing. So that part of it was exciting. I do like that, but it still felt so messy, and just the structure was kind of all over the place. But now when it comes to the after credits, that was definitely the most exciting part of the film. Obviously, seeing Henry Cavill back as Superman is incredible. My one gripe with it, though, why the hell would they use the John Williams score and not the Hans Zimmer score? Why would they do that? Now, I love the John Williams theme. I think it's an incredible theme. It's one of the best superhero themes ever. It's amazing. It's hopeful. It's bright. It's incredible. But that fits the old Superman, right? Henry Cavill's Superman, his theme, his definitive theme should be Hans Zimmer's Man of Steel theme. That's what it should be. I'm sorry. I don't. They made this mistake once in Justice League 2017. They made that mistake. They used John Williams' music and everyone complained about it. And then Zack Snyder's Justice League comes out and we have Hans Zimmer and Tom Hulkenberg's music back for the movie, and we actually hear the original Man of Steel theme in that film because it fits Henry Cavill. It fits him. Yes, it's a little darker. It's a little darker tone, sure, but it fits that character. They should have kept it. That was incredibly disappointing. For Man of Steel 2, they better not have John Williams' theme be the main theme because that would be ridiculous. That'd be ridiculous. But whatever. It was cool to see him. Unfortunately, it was spoiled for me, so it wasn't exciting at all. They butchered that completely. And not even just like the leaks being out there, but even like The Rock himself was talking about it in interviews. He was like, oh yeah, Henry Cavill, oh, Superman's back. Like, why would you spoil that? It was such a exciting thing. If they were going to show it in the trailers or whatever and have him be a part of the movie, that's different. But he was literally just in the after credits scene for 2 seconds. Why would you spoil that? And, you know, obviously leaks and stuff were out there too. So unfortunately, I knew about it before seeing it, so I couldn't really have an excited reaction. I would have been screaming. I would have been freaking out. When I did see it, when it was leaked, that's when I was freaking out. But it'll be nicer to see that in the movie itself. Unfortunately, and I couldn't get that experience. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on this movie in the comment section below. I will see you all in my next one. Peace out.